Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Best Actors in Modern Star Trek. This video is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Norman Buchwald. Thank you so much, Norman Buchwald, for your support and your suggestions. So, in this video, I'm going to count down my top 10 favorite actors, or the actors who I think do the best job, or sort of the best actors in the modern era of Star Trek. So that is Star Trek Discovery and everything on board that came out after it. So this, to be clear, Discovery, Lower Decks, Picard, Prodigy, and Strange New Worlds. Now, I am not including the reboot movies. I'm keeping it just to television. And so there's a couple of ways I was thinking about going about this, because there's some things I could have eliminated right off the bat. First of all, 2 out of the 5 shows on Modern Trek are animated shows, and so I was actually toying with the fact of not including animated, because voice acting is actually very different than live action acting. However, if I had excluded those, then that would have eliminated 2 of the 5 shows and only left 3 shows. So even though voice acting is definitely a very different thing, it's still a very valid form of acting and a very difficult thing to do. I was listening to Mike McMahon talk about how people should discount the difficulties of voice acting, that it's not just simply going in the booth and speaking some lines. It's a lot more complex and subtle than that. So ultimately, I didn't want to eliminate 2/5 of the pool, so I have included voice actors from Lower Decks and Prodigy in this list. And the other thing I could have eliminated was legacy actors who were already in earlier iterations of Star Trek. This particularly applies to the show Star Trek Picard, which uses a lot of actors who have been in Star Trek previous. But then I thought, again, I don't want to eliminate too much, so I decided to include these legacy actors, but I'm only judging them for the performances in Modern Trek. So the performances in Legacy Trek will not be considered at all. If they're going to make this list, it's solely for the performance in Modern Trek. And I will say up front that Patrick Stewart didn't even make my short list for Modern Trek, even though when I did my top 10 actors of all Star Trek, he was number 1. But I didn't hate his performance in Star Trek Picard. I just don't think it was at the level of his performance in earlier Star Trek. I thought it was fine, but not sort of staying outish. So that's just something I wanted to get out right away. The other thing is, you don't have to be a main cast member, just like when I did my other top 10 actors videos, did a whole bunch now, requested by Norman Buchwald and others, that in order to be considered for this list, all you have to do is appear in 2 or more episodes, and that would technically make you a recurring character. And so it's not just the main cast members, also include actors who are not main cast members, but they have to appear in 2 or more episodes. That's the cutoff, because if it was just 1 episode, then you're one off, and that's a different category for me. Anyway, so like I did for a couple of these top 10 actor videos I've been doing so far, I'm gonna mention every actor I put on my short list. I'm just gonna blow through them like very fast with the honorable mentions. Just say their name and what they're from, and then move on. And then when I get to my top 4 honorable mentions, I will talk a bit more about them and why I chose them, and then I'll get to the top 10, the big show. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into my list. And as I said, I'm going to start out by just rambling off first set of honorable mentions. So first honorable mention is Isa Briones, or if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who played Soji and others from Star Trek Picard. Then there's Christina Chong, who played Laan, Nini, and Singh from Strange New World. Then there's Jason Mentozokas, again, sorry for the mispronunciation, who played, I can't even remember that character's name, the Tellurite from Prodigy. Ed Speleers, again, not that great with these pronunciations, but he played Jack Crusher from Star Trek Picard. Then Tig Notaro, who played Jet Reno from Star Trek Discovery. Then Eugene Cordio, who plays Rutherford from Star Trek Lower Decks. Then Dawn Lewis, who plays Captain Freeman from Star Trek Lower Decks. Then Kate McGrew, of course, the Janeway hologram, and Admiral Janeway from Prodigy. Rebecca Romaine, who plays number 1, Una Chen Riley from Strange New World. Then there's Todd Stashwick, who plays Captain Shaw from Star Trek Picard. Then Jason Isaacs, who plays Captain Lorca from Star Trek Discovery. And then Ella Purnell, who plays Gwen from Star Trek Prodigy. So now getting into a bit more details on my top 4 honorable mentions. First of those is Jerry Ryan, which of course 7 of 9 from Star Trek Picard. Jerry Ryan was also in my top 10 actors list for Legacy Trek, and I think she does an equally good performance, a very different kind of performance, because it shows the growth in 7 of 9's character from just being a blank emotionless drone to having lived as a human being for a couple decades, and how that has an impact on her, yet she still has aspect of her Borg personality within. So I think she does an amazing job at this, particularly when we get into the end of season 3, where she's dealing from discrimination from her captain, and how she reconciles that with her loyalty to Picard, I think was done really nicely. So next honorable mention is Gabrielle Rules, who plays who plays T'Lyn in Star Trek Lower Decks. Now you might think this is a bit of, maybe this doesn't deserve to be on my best acting list, because she's basically just doing a voiceover of a Vulcan, so she's being very sort of stoic and matter of fact. However, I think there's a lot of really subtle nuance in this, and I think the way she performs these lines, which again are written really hilariously, and most of the time she is saying the punchline of a joke, but saying it in a very strange Vulcan way. I think the way she delivers this is actually really brilliant and should not be underestimated. The way she was able to pull off these stoic Vulcan lines. And I think a lot of people who played Vulcan say this, that it's actually way more difficult to play a Vulcan. You think it's easy because they're just being monotone and simple, but you have to try to portray emotions and portray different ways of thinking within being stoic and monotone, which is a lot more difficult to do. And so I think she deserves a lot of credit for pulling that off. Next honorable mention is Marina Sirtis for Star Trek Picard. Is Counselor Troy, of course. Or Deanna Troy, I should say. She's not really Counselor at this stage. But yes, I talked about her a bit in my other videos, how there's a lot of people out there who hate this actress for some reason and think she's a terrible actress, and really I gotten so many comments saying that she's one of the worst actresses ever, and I disagreed with that. I didn't think her acting in TNG was always the best. There are a couple exceptions, but I think she herself is a good actress, and I think she does an even better job in Picard than she did in TNG, particularly in the first appearance in the season 1 episode Nepenthe. I thought her performance absolutely amazing. I think this was her best performance ever, if I'm being honest, and Counselor Troy at her best. She also did a decent job in season 3 as well, so that's why she made it this high for me. So next, our last honorable mention, I should say, is Doug Jones as Saru, who is known as an amazing physical actor, in which he does do a really good job with that, but also he's a good actor overall. The way he portrays this emotion, making Saru a very interesting, very dynamic character. Yes, I think that deserves a lot of praise as well. So now we finally come to my top 10 favorite actors in modern Trek, and we'll start with my number 10, Jack Quaid as Ensign Boimler from Star Trek Lower Decks. Now, again, the complexities of voice acting should not be underestimated, but with Boimler, you may think that's kind of a one-note character, but he's not. And I got to be honest, I did give a lot of credit to Jack Quaid for the Boimler scream and just the way that he acts, really hysterical sometimes. But the fact that he can portray a range of emotions within that, and you get some really emotional scenes, such as I'm thinking in the penultimate episode of season 3, where he's having a but he's having a life crisis because he heard that his transporter duplicate was killed, and the nuance that they play with that and his frustration, I think is brilliant, and I think overall he does. And actually seeing him in live action Strange New Worlds, he played an amazing performance there as well. So yeah, he is my number 10. So next we'll get into my number 9, which is Bruce Horrick, who plays God, I want to say his name is Hemmer. Yeah, that's his name. I know is the I was going to say Andorian, but he's a ANR, which is the type of Andorian. Anyway, he is an amazing performance by Bruce Horrick, who did such a good job of, I want to say humanize, but actually bringing Hemmer to life and making him a very complex, kind of a grumpy character at first, but you see a lot of nuance within that, and particularly with his relationship with Uhura, as it starts off a bit rocky, but then he takes her on sort of as a kind of a mentor. And I still think it was a huge mistake killing him off at the end of season 1. I think he was one of the best characters. So I think that was not a smart move on the writer's behalf, because they could have used this great actor and this great character longer. Anyway, next we'll get into my number 8, which is Paul F. Tompkins as Dr. Migmalu from Star Trek Lower Decks. Now, this may seem like a very odd choice, as this character doesn't appear all that much, and he's mostly a comedic character, I would say. But I think comedy, again, is its own art form and something not to be underestimated. It's hard to do great comedic performances correctly. And I think... And it's not just the lines, the way they're written. I think it's more of the delivery from this voice actor that really brings Migmalu to life and really makes his jokes always hilarious. Rather, he being calling his Mima when he's put in command of the ship, or having a phaser fight with the replicator, or puffing himself up and during a fight to the death with Orion. Always manages to sell the performances so well, and it makes it a recurring character I want to see more of. In fact, I think that this character, when it was first introduced, was not meant to be that much big of a character or recur that much, but just because it was so successful and done so well, I think is why we keep seeing this character over and over again. And of course, I gotta mention Paul F. Tompkins. Of course, I recognize as a veteran voice actor from playing Mr. Peanut Butters in the show BoJack Horseman, where he did an amazing job. That's one of my favorite animated shows of all time. So I think he definitely has the experience of being a great voice actor, and brings that here. So next we will get into my number 7, which is LeVar Burton from Star Trek Picard. Now, LeVar Burton as Geordi LaForge only appears in, I think, 3 or 4 episodes of Picard, but I think his performance here, I think, it's hard to compare 4 episodes to 176 episodes he appeared with in Next Generation, but it's not that I didn't like his performance in Next Generation. I thought it was always good, but in those 4 episodes in Picard, it was exceptional. Particularly the scene I'm thinking of when he finally confronts Data and the fact that Data could be brought back to life or he could die yet again, and how he was confessing that when Data died it broke him, and just the level of emotion that he showed and the way that he sold that scene was just so powerful. I think it was easily one of the best performances of the show. And also the way he plays a concerned father, the way he interacts with his daughters, and the way he was not willing to help Picard at first because he wanted to protect his daughters, and the kind of relationship he had and how he was put at odds with one of his daughters because of that. I think he sold that really, really well, and I do think those, even though it was just 4 episodes, those performances, I think, were better than anything he delivered in Next Generation, so he makes my list for that. Then we'll get into my number 6, which is Agnes Emery, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who plays Zero in Star Trek Prodigy. Again, getting back to the voice actor, Zero, I think, is a very interesting character, a Medusan, and one who is portrayed as being sexless or genderless. And so I think that is a tricky thing for a voice actor to pull off, and I think that they do an amazing job at pulling this off, and also bringing a bit of making Zero, because Zero is very sort of logical, but it also shows a lot of emotion as well. And the nuance involved with that of being this being of light, how is that something you can portray in a voice performance is a very complex thing, and I think this actor pulls it off amazingly well. So now we'll get into my number 5, which is Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek Picard. Again, getting back to the legacy actors, but I think Frakes in particular, his performance in Picard was always the best. Like, and the season 1 episode in Nepenthe, I think it was an absolutely emotional powerhouse. I think easily one of the best episodes of Modern Trek, and a lot of that has to do with Jonathan Frakes' performance. It's not like, ooh, look, it's Riker again. No, it's the seeing what became of Riker, the tragedies of having to deal with losing his son, and having a quiet life on, a planet with his wife and daughter, and the relationship he has with Picard. He's willing to risk it all for that, and the memories he shares, and of course the pizza oven is an amazing, amazing performance. And also, he was easily one of the best parts of season 3 of Picard. Easily something I was always looking forward to, even if the writing wasn't always there. I'm thinking of the time where he yelled at Picard for no good reason. That's not the actor's fault, it's the writer's fault. But most of the performances that Riker gives, and even through the humor and through the complex situations, I think he nailed it. I think he was easily the VIP of season 3 of Picard. That's just me. So next we'll get into my number 4, which is Tawny Newsome as Ensign Beckett Mariner from Star Trek Lower Decks. This is my highest rated voice actor on this list. I think as Mariner, she portrays a range of emotions, even though on the surface is a very silly, very chaotic, very hyperactive character who is very usually all over the place, which I think for the most part never comes off as annoying but as hilarious, which in itself is a feat. But on top of that, the range of emotion and the character journeys this character goes through so far as I'm recording this video, the first 4 seasons, he goes through a lot of character journeys, a lot of journeys of self-discovery. And again, you could say, oh, it's just a voice actor sitting in the booth saying the lines, but I think in some ways it's harder to portray that through simply, voice acting. How complex and how intricate. Now, of course, a lot of the animation, the way it's drawn, helps with this performance, but I think the way that she is able to deliver these complexities within this overall silly, over-the-top, humorous performance is something really commendable. So she is my number 4. So next we get into my number 3, which may be a controversial pick, but I will fight anyone on this, and that's Sonequa Martin Green as Michael Burnham from Star Trek Discovery. Now, I know there's a lot of dislike for this character, and that is spilled over to this actress. And I will be the first to agree that Discovery is very hit or miss, and this character is not always written well. You have a lot of scenes where they lean too hard into the sentimentality, and this character cries way more than she should. But none of that has to do with the actor. That is the writing, fault of the writing. And when the actor is given good material, she fucking nails it. She destroys it. I'm thinking particularly of one of my favorite episodes of Modern Trek, where she's forced to kill her friend who's taken over by the villain Control in order to save her crew, and yet she can't do it. And the way she portrays that, she sells that emotional scene of being stuck in the moment, of unable to kill her friend, even though it would cost pretty much everyone in the universe their lives, was one of the best performances I've seen. And then another really standout is at the end of season 4, where she has to watch her. She's dealing with her lover Book, who are put at odds because they're opposite ends in this conflict, and then she has to watch him die, and then still have to command a starship and still have to command this mission to save humanity after she just watched the man she loved the most die. That was such a good performance, and of course he's brought back to life, and her reaction to that was again amazing. So I think again and again, Sonequa Martin Green deserves a lead role in the Star Trek show. I think she's easily an amazing performer. So next we'll get into my number 2, which is Ethan Peck as Spock in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, also appeared in Discovery. And again, I talked about the difficulty of portraying Vulcans and how you have to portray a lot of range within that sort of stoic moment. But Ethan Peck had an even more difficult task because he had to play such an iconic, arguably the most iconic character in all of Star Trek, and portray this new, younger version of him. And quite frankly, and I'll be quite upfront with this, he does a much, much better job than Zachary Quinto did in the Star Trek reboot movies. Nothing against Quinto, but I think Ethan Peck blows him out of the water in terms of his performance. There's the range of emotions that he's able to portray in that stoic line, and just the humor sometimes, and the complexities of what it's like to be a half Vulcan, half human. He really sells this. He really makes this work. So yeah, an amazing actor. So that's number 2 on my list. So now we'll get to my number 1 favorite actor in modern Star Trek, and that is Anson Mount as Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Pike, I think, may end up being my favorite captain of all Star Trek, or at least Anson Mount's version of Pike, I should say. He's everything that you want from a captain. Someone who is very commanding, someone who is very sure of himself, who's a good leader, yet at the same time listens to others. Like, I recently recorded a video, which I'll be releasing soon, of why Captain Jellicoe is a terrible captain. Captain Jellicoe from the episode Chain of Command in Next Generation. And Pike is pretty much the exact opposite of Jellicoe, where Jellicoe was such a terrible captain because he just wanted to rule over others. He wanted to power over others, and he didn't care what anyone had to say. He didn't care about feedback. He didn't care about holding other people's up. He didn't care about boosting them or making them feel better. He just wanted it his way, and he wanted to exert his power over others, which is why he was the worst captain ever portrayed in Star Trek. Whereas Pike is the exact opposite of that. Pike wants to hear what other people have to say, even though he is the captain. At the end of the day, he will make the ultimate decision, but he wants it to be an informed decision. He wants this to be a collaborative action, not just him holding power over others and telling them what to do. He wants to hear what they have to say. He wants them to feel involved. He wants to get to know them. And the way Anson Mount portrays this is just perfect. It is just perfect the way that Anson Mount sells Pike. I don't think Pike, as written, would work as well in the hands of a lesser actor. I think Anson Mount really sells this, really makes it a captain that you want to get behind, a captain that you want to succeed, and a captain that you really root for, because he is such a nice guy. He's such a cool guy, and he will go to hell and back to protect those he cares about, such as his first officer, Una Chin Riley, when she was threatened with being put in prison. He went to risk his life and went to hell to try to save her, and that's the kind of captain you want. And I think Anson Mount really sells this. He does such a good job in the complexities. Even you got the storyline where Pike, knew that he was going to put in the BB chair, and how that was messing with his head, the way that was letting him interfere with his performances as captain, like the way he sold those ranges, those emotional journeys, was so well. And I stand by it. It takes an exceptional actor like Anson Mount to really, really sell it, which he absolutely does, and really is a huge part of the reason why Strange New Worlds is the best show in modern Trek. So that is my number one, Anson Mount as Captain Christopher Pike. So that is it for my top 10 favorite actors in modern Star Trek. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to check out my various other videos I did. I did a lot of series of top 10 actors. I revisited my old videos, top 10 Star Trek actors in Legacy Trek. I did a best one-off guest actors in Star Trek. I think there was another one I did as well. And I'll be doing, best single performance by an actor in a Star Trek show. And then next month I'll be doing animated voice actors. So focusing entirely on the voice actors. So anyway, be sure to check out my channel for that. And also I'm covering Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time, going through all the episodes at the moment, going in season 2, and many other videos on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.